we're golden.
Go for it.
Okay, well, we are the Fab Five. We've got Judy, Ricardo, Shay, and Luaza. Our presentation is titled China's Renewable Energy Revolution. And that's kind of, well, I wouldn't say funny, but when you think of China, you don't really think of renewable energy. What comes to mind when you think of China? I know when I think of it, I think of orange chicken and fried rice. But what comes to mind? Maybe their technological advances, maybe cuisine, culture, but what about how populated their cities are? As you can see, just to give you a little idea, China is slightly smaller than the U.S., and they have about 20% of the total population of the world, while the U.S. has about 4.5%. So just think of the pollution they have in their cities with so many people, all their cars, and things like that. So to further introduce what we're going to talk about today, we do have a little video.
Much of eastern and central China have been choking in heavily polluted air since this weekend, so it may be a surprise to some that China is the world's largest investor in green energy. Next, our correspondent from Canada looks at the good and bad of China's role in the global renewable energy sector.
This week, China promised to join the International Renewable Energy Agency in efforts to switch the world to wind, solar, and hydropower, but some have questioned how helpful Chinese investment in renewable energy technology will actually be. Over the weekend, the air in Beijing and 30 other Chinese cities turned toxic. Off-the-chart readings of tiny pollutants that can penetrate the lungs has had hospitals reporting a surge in patients with respiratory diseases.
That's because of their heavy reliance on coal. I think there's been a huge push for economic development based on coal because it's cheap, but we're now seeing the hidden costs of that. The cost to human health, the cost to the environment.
China is the world's biggest coal producer and consumer, using an average 3.6 billion tons of coal per year. But it's also the world's biggest investor in renewable energy. According to this report on green energy technology investment, China came in top for 2011. It put in $52 billion in renewable power, placing U.S. in second place.
It has been driving down the cost of renewable energy, which is going to make them sort of more accessible. So
Our thesis is that by the year 2050, China will be the largest producer and consumer of alternative forms of energy. One more. So we have an agenda which we will be addressing these three questions throughout our presentation, which is why is China changing, what is currently happening, and also what will China look like by the year 2050.
So there are several things that are motivating China to change, and one of them is that it desires to clean its base, and what that means is that they're trying to reduce their carbon emissions. The second one is that they want to increase energy security and prevent international conflicts because countries like the U.S. are concerned with their carbon emissions. And as you can see here, China accounts for 22% of all CO2 emissions, and it's a country that produces the most CO2 emissions. 70% of their power comes from coal, and even though it produces most carbon emissions, the U.S. actually produces most emissions per capita. Another reason why China is changing is its growing population, and it's only expected to increase 2% from 1.36 billion to 1.38 billion, and that's about 25 million people. The U.S. in comparison is expected to increase 28%. Along with the growing population, there's going to be an increase in demand for housing, energy, and clean water. Another reason is urbanization. Right now, China has the second largest rural population in the world, but it's one of the three countries that's expected to increase 37%. It's expected to account for 37% of all urbanization in the world by the year 2050. So by 2050, about 2/3 of China's population is going to live in urban areas. And along with that, the building sector is also going to grow. So what is currently happening? By the year 2020, China is expected to account for 40% of the growth in renewable energy, and in 2013, it installed more renewable energy than all of Europe and the Asia-Pacific region, and Ricardo is going to talk more about that.
Yeah, so like Judy said, a lot of the progress that we're going to see in the future is coming from the installed power plants that are currently being installed. We're also going to talk about electricity generation and the role of renewable energy in electricity generation and the investments that are being made at the moment for a greener future. Right, so China has the largest power supply in the world. It's rated at 1.25 trillion watts, and of those watts, 30% comes from renewable energy sources. In comparison, the U.S. has a slightly smaller power supply system, rated at 1.16 trillion watts, but only 12% of those watts come from renewable energy sources. In terms of actual electricity generation, 20% of the total electricity generation comes from water, wind, and solar renewable energy sources. So which one of these sources produces the most energy? It's hydropower by a large margin, as you can see, because it's the blue section of the graph. Right now it's about 3/4. And this is supposed to say 2050, 2005. And next slide. A perfect example of China's impressive hydropower system is the Three Gorges Dam, which produces 99 trillion watts, 99 terawatts annually. To give you a sense of what that means, it could satisfy Denmark's annual uses of energy 3 times. The most revealing sign about China's renewable energy revolution is in the investment data, because from 2007 to 2013, the renewable energy investment increases from 37% to 75% if nuclear energy is included. At the same time, there's been a decline in the investment in non-renewable energy sources. From 2007 to 2013, it went from 62% to 25%. And this just shows how China has been increasing their investments, while Europe and the US, which is the blue and the green, have been decreasing.
Okay, so at this point, China's goal is to reduce their carbon footprint, and according to a recent study, China could stop depending on coal 100% by the year 2050. But today, China consumes as much coal as every country in the world combined, and it's also the largest greenhouse gas emitter. Another thing is that China's huge carbon footprint led to a climate pact between the US and China, where China could to its greenhouse emissions by the year 2030, and to increase renewable energy by 20%. There's just a picture where China and the US are trying to make a deal. So China says that we agree to cut the carbon emissions, and then they say, let's shake their hands, but they cannot see their hands because of the pollution. Yeah. Also, according to a recent study, China could exceed its expectations and achieve much more than 20% in renewable energy, but studies states that China could produce more than 85% of its electricity and 60% of the total energy needs from renewable energy by 2050, and of the 85 total energy from renewables, 64 could come from solar wind, and only 7% could come from coal. That's it.
Okay, so to sum things up, basically, China's growing population is leading to an increase in greenhouse gas emissions, so they're trying to lower that by using renewable energy. And also the growing population is leading to more people going to urbanization, and which is also leading to the growing building population or building sector growth. So that could also lead to more pollution. China is also the largest, China's the largest power system in the world, and they're trying to make that power system mostly renewable energy. Does anyone remember which renewable energy sources use the most? Yeah.
Hydropower?
Yes. And basically, this investment in renewable energy is increasing. Meanwhile, the energy on non-renewables is decreasing by a significant amount. And by 2050, they plan to stop using coal 100%. Thank you.
All right, I tell you what, if you guys will log off and walk over that way, who's presenting next? Which group? Academics? Are you guys up next? Go ahead, and you'll be getting set up. No, stay up front, because I wanted people to ask you at least one question while these guys are getting prepared. Yeah, and you can ask them.